Commander Thelnora stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the stars outside remain perfectly still, and that was the problem, because stars should never stay still when you are traveling through space. Her fleet of 12 ships drifted like dead fish in an ocean of darkness, and with each passing hour, the situation grew worse. The gravitational anomaly had appeared without warning, pulling the entire Kelvorian expeditionary fleet into its grip and damaging every single engine system. Simultaneously, Thelnora had served in the Kelvorian Imperial Navy for 30 cycles and had never seen anything like it. The anomaly had vanished as quickly as it appeared, but the damage was done. Her second officer, Ravik, approached with his tablet, glowing with bad news written all over his green-scaled face, and Thelnora already knew what he would say before he opened his mouth. Life support systems are failing across the fleet, Commander, Ravik said quietly, so the rest of the bridge crew would not panic too much, but Thelnora saw their antenna twitch anyway, because Kelvorians had excellent hearing, and everyone already knew they were dying slowly. How long do we have? Thelnora asked, though she did not really want to know the answer. 3 days, maybe 4, if we shut down non-essential systems and move everyone into the central sections of each ship, Ravik replied, and his voice carried the weight of 10,000 lives. Hanging by a thread, Thelnora pulled up the star charts on her command display and studied their position. They were far from Kelvorian space, very far, and the nearest allied species had colonies about 2 weeks away at maximum speed, but her fleet had no speed at all right now. They were just floating metal coffins, waiting for the air to run out. Send the distress beacon on all frequencies, Thelnora ordered, and make sure it includes our exact situation and coordinates already. Done, Commander, Ravik said, but then he hesitated before adding something else. We have received responses from 3 nearby species. Relief flooded through Thelnora for just a moment before she saw Ravik's expression, and the relief died quickly. They all declined, Commander, Ravik said with barely controlled anger. The Vortani said the risk of sending ships through the anomaly zone was too great. The Hexarians said they lacked the technical ability to repair Kelvorian engines, and the Zindari simply said it was not their problem. Thelnora felt her blood turn cold, and not from the dropping temperatures on the ship. The galaxy was full of species who talked about cooperation and unity and building bridges between worlds, but when actual help was needed, when lives hung in the balance, suddenly everyone had excuses and reasons why they could not act. What about our own fleet? Thelnora asked, knowing the answer would not be good either. The nearest Kelvorian rescue vessels are 19 days away, Ravik said, and his shoulders slumped with the weight of impossible mathematics. Because everyone on the bridge could subtract 3 from 19 and know what that meant. 19 days, and they had maybe. Thelnora looked around her bridge at the crew who had served with her through countless missions. These were good people, dedicated officers who followed every regulation and protocol perfectly. The Kelvorian way was order and precision and doing things by the book. But right now the book had no answer. She walked to the main viewport and stared out at the stars, thinking about the families on her ships, the children in the education decks, the engineers who kept everything running, the medical staff who were probably already preparing for the worst. Thelnora had led these people into this mess following her orders to explore this sector, and now she could not save them. Commander, we are picking up another signal, Ravik called out suddenly, and Thelnora turned quickly, hoping against hope that someone had changed their mind. It's a human vessel, Ravik said, and his tone carried confusion mixed with something else, maybe disappointment, because everyone knew about humans. They were the newcomers to galactic society. Barely 200 years since first contact, a species that played with dangerous technology and broke safety protocols like they were suggestions instead of laws. The Kelvorians had always kept humans at arm's length, considering them reckless children playing with fire. What do they want? Thelnora asked. They picked up our distress call, Ravik said, reading the incoming message, his eyes widening slightly. They are diverting course to render assistance. Sethler felt her stomach twist because accepting help from humans would be humiliating. The Kelvorian Empire had strict laws about maintaining dignity, and humans were classified as a junior species not yet ready for full partnerships. But then she thought about the children on her ships, and the air running out, and pride suddenly seemed like a stupid reason to die. How far away are they? Thelnora asked. 6 hours at their current speed, Ravik replied. But Commander, their ship is small, just an exploration vessel with maybe 50 crew. They cannot possibly have the resources or expertise to help you 6 hours. Sigzaris Thilnair repeated and looked at her dying fleet while she tried to decide between pride and survival. The hours crawled by like wounded animals, and Thelnora watched the environmental readings drop across all 12 ships. Oxygen levels falling, temperatures dropping, power reserves draining away, and then finally, a new contact appeared on the sensors, moving fast, much faster than regulations typically allowed. The human ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel close enough that Kelvorian protocol officers would have filed complaints about dangerous navigation, but Thelnora just watched as the small vessel positioned itself near her flagship. Incoming transmission, Commander Ravik said. Put it through, Thelnora ordered. The view screen flickered and showed a human woman sitting in a captain's chair that looked too casual for a military vessel. The woman had dark hair pulled back and eyes that seemed tired but determined. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Wayfarer, she said, and her voice came through. The translators, clearly we received your distress call and came as fast as we could. What do you need? Thelnara stood straighter, drawing on decades of military training and protocol before responding. This is Commander Thelnora of the Kelvorian Imperial Fleet. We appreciate your concern, Captain, but we have the situation under control. Our own rescue vessels are on the way, though. Human captain tilted her head slightly, and something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. Commander, Chen said carefully, I just spent 6 hours pushing my engines past safety limits to get here, and my sensors are telling me your life support is failing across your entire fleet, so with all due respect, you do not have the situation under control. Thalara felt anger flash through her because humans should not speak to Kelvorian commanders this way, but then she saw Captain Chen leaned forward and the amusement was gone, replaced by something more serious. I did not come all this way to watch people, Dai Chen said quietly, so you can accept help and maybe swallow some of that pride. Or you can float here in the dark until your air runs out. The choice is yours, Commander, but choose fast because from what my engineers are seeing, you do not have much time. The bridge fell completely silent, and every Kelvorian officer stared at their commander, waiting to see what she would do, because accepting help from humans would violate protocols and damage reputations, but refusing help would kill everyone. On these ships, Thelnara looked at the human captain and then at her own crew, and thought about all those families waiting in the dark sections of the ships, running out of time, running out of air, running out of hope. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words stuck in her throat because whatever she said next would change everything. An alien fleet was stranded, then humanity arrived to help. Part 2. Breaking protocol. The silence on the bridge stretched like pulled metal ready to snap, and Thelnara could feel every pair of eyes watching her, waiting for her decision. But before she could speak, her communications officer interrupted with panic in his voice. Commander, we have a problem. One of the junior engineers just transmitted our technical specifications to the human ship without authorization. Thala spun around, her mind racing, because that was a court-martial offense, sharing Kelvorian military technology with outsiders. Especially humans violated about 15 different regulations and could mean years in a detention facility. Was it Thelnara? Demanded engineer. The big ma'am, the communications officer said, and Thelnara felt her heart sink because Ravik was her second officer, a decorated veteran who knew better than anyone what breaking protocol meant. To get him on the come right now, Thelnara ordered, but even as she said it, part of her understood why he did it, because Ravik had 3 children on one of the other ships, and protocol probably seemed less important than keeping them breath. Then Gravik's face appeared on a secondary screen, and he looked tired but not apologetic. At Ali note, I did, Commander Ravik said before Thelnora could start yelling, and I know the consequences, but we are dying out here. And someone needed to make a decision, so I made one. You had no right. Kelnora started, but Ravik cut her off, which was another violation to add to the growing list with. Respect, Commander. I had every right because my duty is to this crew and these families, not to some regulation written by people sitting safe in comfortable offices light years away. Thelnora wanted to argue, wanted to defend the protocols that had guided her entire career, but then Captain Chen's voice came through the main. Speakers Commander Thelnora, my engineers have been analyzing the data your officer sent, and I think we might have some solutions if you are willing to listen. Thelnora looked between the screens, seeing Ravik's determined face and Chen's calm professional expression, and she realized the decision had already been made for her, because refusing help now would just be spite, and spite was not worth 10,000. Lives very well, Captain Chen, Thelnora said, and her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. What are you proposing, Chen? Stood up from her chair and moved to a display panel where technical diagrams appeared. Your engine suffered a cascading failure. In the primary power distribution network, Chen explained, and your backup systems cannot handle the load, but you do not need to fix the engines right now. You just need to keep people alive until proper rescue arrives. We already know our life support is failing, Thelnora said, trying not to sound bitter. But thank you for that assessment, Chen. Smiled slightly, but it was not mocking. We have portable atmospheric processors and emergency power cells. Allah, Chen said, and we can create temporary support bridges between your ships, pooling resources more efficiently. Your people were trying to keep each ship independent, but that is actually making things worse. This goes against standard emergency procedures. Thelnora protested because Kelvorian doctrine said each vessel should maintain independence in case of cascade failures. Your doctrine assumes you have time and redundancy. Chen replied, but you have neither, so we need to think differently. My team can install the equipment if you give us access before. Thelnora could respond. Another alarm blared across the bridge, and her tactical officer shouted, a warning, Commander. Vessel 7 just lost primary life support completely. They have maybe 2 hours of reserve. Thelnora felt ice in her veins because Vessel 7 carried 800 people, including a full civilian research team with families. Captain Chen, Thelnora said, and the words came out harder than she intended. You said, your team can help do it now. Start with Vessel 7. Chen nodded. Once then started giving orders to her crew through her own comm, and Thelnora watched on the sensors as small human transport pods launched from the Wayfarer, carrying equipment and personnel toward the dying Calvorian ships. This is irregular, Thelnora muttered to herself, but loud enough that Ravik heard her through the open channel. Irregular, but necessary, Commander, Ravik replied, and something in his voice made Thelnora look at him again. Really look at him and see how much fear he was carrying. Your children are on Vessel 7, Thelnora said quietly, understanding now why Ravik had broken protocol so completely. My youngest daughter is 5 cycles old, Ravik said, and his voice cracked slightly. She asked me before this mission when I would teach her to navigate by the stars like I promised, and I told her when I got back, but if I do nothing now, there will be no getting back. Thelnora felt something break inside her chest, some wall she had built between duty and emotion, and she realized that all the protocols in the galaxy meant nothing if the people following them ended up dead. Next hours became a blur of activity as human engineers in their bulky environment suits moved through Kelvorian ships, installing equipment that looked crude and improvised compared to proper Kelvorian technology, but somehow it worked. The atmospheric processors hummed to life, pumping fresh air into dying compartments, and the power cells provided enough energy to keep critical systems running. Thelnora watched it all from her bridge, seeing humans work alongside confused Kelvorian crew members, pointing at displays, using hand gestures when the translators lagged, and somehow making themselves understood across the language barriers. In different ways of thinking, one of the humans, a broad-shouldered man with graying hair, appeared to be leading the engineering effort on Vessel 7, and Thelnora watched him move with confidence that seemed almost reckless. He crawled into access tunnels that Kelvorian regulations said required 3-person teams and proper safety protocols. He used tools and ways the manufacturers probably never intended, and somehow he made broken systems work again. Who is that? Thelnora asked, pointing at the screen showing the human engineer. Captain Chen answered from the open comm channel. That is Jackson, my chief engineer, and probably the best problem solver in this sector. He does not always follow the manual, but he gets results as if to prove the point. Jackson emerged from an access tunnel covered in some kind of lubricant and gave a thumbs-up gesture toward the camera before moving to the next crisis spot. And Thelnora found herself almost smiling despite everything, because there was something admirable about that kind of dedication. Life support on Vessel 7 is stabilizing, Tealner's tactical officer reported, and the relief in his voice was clear. Oxygen levels rising to acceptable ranges. One ship saved, 11 more to go. And Thelnera allowed herself to feel a tiny spark of hope. Over the next several hours, the human crew spread across the Kelvorian fleet, working miracles with spare parts and improvised solutions. They connected ships together in ways that made Kelvorian engineers nervous, creating networks that shared resources and backed each other up. Captain Chen's approach was messy and violated dozens of safety protocols, but it worked, and that was what Materet Thalara found herself talking to Chen regularly, coordinating the effort and slowly beginning to understand how humans thought they did not see regulations as absolute rules, but rather as guidelines that could be bent or broken. When the situation required it, they valued creativity over conformity, and results over procedure. It should have bothered Thelnera more than it did, because she had spent her whole life following the Kelvorian way, but watching her people survive. Because humans were willing to color outside the lines made her question whether the Kelvorian way was always the best way. Commander, we just received word from Kelvorian Command, Ravik said, and his expression was hard to read. They are sending a proper rescue fleet, but it will still take 6 days to arrive. 6 days, Thelnera repeated, and looked at the environmental readings, which were improving slowly thanks to the human equipment. We can make 6 days, Noravik nodded, but then added something else. Command also sent orders regarding the human assistance. They want us to document everything for a formal inquiry into protocol violation. Stella felt anger flash through her, hot and sharp, because some were safe. Bureaucrats were already preparing to criticize decisions made while dying, and suddenly she understood why Ravik had broken protocol without hesitation. Tell Command we will comply with all formal inquiries, Nelnara said carefully. But right now we are focused on keeping people alive. Everything. Lelskin Waitrovik smiled slightly, and Nelnara saw approval in his eyes, because maybe she was finally learning what really mattered. The main view screen, she could see the human vessel Wayfarer still positioned protectively near her flagship, and for the first time since this crisis began, Thelnora felt genuine gratitude toward another species, even if they were supposedly junior partners who did not know their place. A new alarm suddenly shrieked across the bridge, different from before, and more urgent. What now? Thelnora demanded. It's Vessel 3. Commander, the tactical officer said, and fear filled his voice. Their reactor is becoming unstable. An alien fleet was stranded, then humanity arrived to help. Part 3. Unlikely alliance. The reactor warning changed everything in an instant, because an unstable reactor on Vessel 3 meant everyone within 3 kilometers was in danger, and that included 4 other Kelvorian ships, plus the human vessel Wayfarer that was still positioned nearby, trying to help. Get me a status report now, Thelnora ordered, and her bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. But she could see the fear in their movements, because reactor failures were every spacer's nightmare. Vessel 3's engineering team reports containment field fluctuations, the tactical officer said, reading data as it came in. They estimate 30 minutes until possible breach, maybe less. 30 minutes to evacuate over 1,000 people from Vessel 3 and move for other ships in the human vessel out of the blast radius, except the other ships could barely move, and evacuation would take hours, not minutes. The mathematics of survival were not working in their favor. Captain Chen, were you monitoring that? Thelnora called out. Already on it, Commander Chen replied, and Thelnora could hear shouting in the background of the human bridge. My team is pulling up your reactor specifications now. Your team cannot possibly understand Kelvorian reactor systems, Thelnera started, but Chen interrupted. Commander, with respect, we do not have time to argue about credentials. Either we try something, or a lot of people die. So let my people work. Thelnara wanted to argue, wanted to follow protocol, and wait for proper Kelvorian experts, but proper experts were 6 days away, and they had 30 minutes, so she made the second hardest decision of her career after accepting human help in the first place. Proceed, Captain, but coordinate with our engineering teams within minutes. Jackson, the human chief engineer, was on a transport pod, heading toward Vessel 3, and Thelnera watched him go, wondering if she was sending a brave man to his death, or if human Improvisation could somehow save them. Again, Jackson reached Vessel 3 and immediately started arguing with the Kelvorian. Engineers through the translation system and Thelnora could hear the conversation on the bridge monitor. You need to manually vent the primary cooling system, Jackson was saying, and redirect flow through the secondary manifolds that violates reactor design principles. A Kelvorian engineer protested. The secondary manifolds are not rated for that kind of pressure. Then reinforce them with emergency force fields, Jackson shot back. Or would you rather follow the manual while the reactor explodes? The Galvorian engineer looked ready to argue more, but Ravik, who had transported to Vessel 3 to help, spoke up. Instead, listen to him just this once. If he is wrong, we die, and if we do nothing, we die anyway, so we might as well tritha. Kelvorian engineers reluctantly started following Jackson's instructions, and Thelnora watched the reactor readings hoping for improvement, but instead the fluctuations got worse. The containment field was degrading faster. Nog Jackson, it is not working, Thelnora said, trying to keep her voice calm. No, the human engineer replied, and he sounded frustrated because the cooling system is clogged with debris from the initial damage. Someone needs to physically clear the intake valves. Can it be done remotely, Thelnora? Stoush, though she already suspected the answer. Negative, Commander, Ravik answered. Someone has to go into the reactor chamber and clear the blockages manually, but the radiation levels in there would kill a Kelvorian in under 5 minutes. What about a human? Thelnora asked, and the question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Humans are more resistant to radiation than Kelvorians, Jackson said slowly, but not that much more resistant. I might last 7 or 8 minutes before the exposure became lethal. Falera watched on the monitor as Jackson stared at the reactor chamber access hatch, and she realized he was actually considering it. This human who owed nothing to the Kelvorian Empire, who'd been treated like a junior partner and told his methods were crude, was thinking about sacrificing himself to save people who looked down on his entire species. Do not even think about it, Engineer, Thelnora said firmly. We will find another way. There is no other way, Jackson replied, and started pulling on additional protective gear. Commander, I have a daughter back on Earth, and I would want someone to try this if she needed help. So I am going in. Thelnora felt her heart's twist because she understood that kind of love, but before Jackson could open the hatch, Ravik stepped in front of him. You will last 8 minutes, human, Ravik said, and his voice was steady despite the fear that must have been coursing through him. But I know these systems better than you do. I can clear the blockages in 6 minutes if you talk me through what needs to be done. Jackson stared at the Kelvorian officer, and something passed between them, some understanding that transcended species and protocols. The environment in there will kill you, Ravik, Jackson said quietly. Then, you better give me very clear instructions, Ravik replied, and managed a slight smile. So I do not waste time making mistakes, Thelnora wanted to order Ravik to stand down, but she saw the determination in his eyes and knew he would not obey, because this was about more than following orders. This was about his children and every other family on these ships. Ravik entered the reactor chamber, and immediately Thelnora could see his bio reading spike as radiation washed over him. Jackson stood outside talking him through every step, explaining where the blockages were and how to clear them without causing more damage. Move to the primary intake on your left, Jackson instructed. You should see a panel with 4 manual release valves. I see it, Ravik replied, but his voice was already strained from the exposure. Turn each valve counterclockwise 3 full rotations, then pull the bypass lever. Thelnora watched the seconds tick by, and each one felt like an eternity. She saw Ravik's bio readings climbing to dangerous levels, saw his movements on the camera feed becoming slower, less coordinated, and she wanted to scream at him to get out, but she stayed silent because pulling him out now would mean everyone died. The first intake is clear, Ravik reported, and his breathing sounded labored. Good, Jackson said, and Thelnora could hear the stress in the human's voice. To now move to the secondary intake, 20 meters forward. Ravik stumbled toward the secondary intake and fell to one knee before catching himself and continuing forward, and Thelnora realized she was gripping her command chair so hard her claws were leaving marks in the material. 6 minutes had passed. I am at the secondary intake, Ravik said, and his words were slurred like someone fighting unconsciousness. Same procedure, Jackson said. Firmly turn the valves, counterclockwise 3 times, then pull the bypass Rovik. Reached for the valves, but his hands were shaking badly and he missed twice before finally gripping the first valve, and Thelnora watched him force his body to cooperate, turning. With agonizing slowness 7 minutes, the secondary intake is clear, Rovik whispered. Then get out of there now, Jackson shouted, and Rovik turned toward the exit, but his legs gave out and he collapsed to the decon, the monitors. Thelnora saw Jackson grab an emergency environment suit and start putting it on, moving faster than she thought possible. What are you doing, Thelnora? Demanded, going to get him. Jackson said simply, You will die to one of the Kelvorian engineers protested, maybe, Jackson replied. But I am not leaving him in there. Jackson sealed his suit and opened the hatch running into the radioactive chamber toward Ravik's fallen form, and Thelnora watched the human engineer reach Ravik and start dragging him toward the exit, while the reactor chamber filled with deadly radiation that was killing both of them. They made it through the hatch, and other crew members immediately pulled them clear, while medical teams rushed forward, and Thelnora finally looked at the reactor readings. Fluctuations were stabilizing, the containment field was holding, the reactor was cooling down. It worked, Thelnora whispered. Done, Vessel 3. Jackson and Ravik were being rushed to medical facilities, both unconscious from radiation exposure, but alive. At least for now, and Thelnora felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of humans, because no amount of protocol or regulation would make someone run into death for a stranger. Captain Chen, Thelnora said, and her voice was rough with emotion. Your engineer saved my officer, and probably all of us. Shen appeared on the view screen, and she looked tired beyond measure. Jackson does things like that, she said simply. It's why his hair is gray, and why I keep him around. Thelnora nodded, because she had no words adequate to express what she felt, but Chen seemed to understand anyway. Commander, my medical officer says both men will survive, Chen continued, but they need treatment beyond what our field equipment can provide. Bring them both too. My flagship, Thelnora ordered immediately. Our medical facilities are better equipped, and after what they just did, they deserve the best care we can give over. Des. The next hours, as Ravik and Jackson recovered in medical isolation, Thelnora noticed something remarkable happening on her fleet. Kelvorian engineers were working side by side with human crew members. No longer with suspicion, but with respect. They shared meals in the common areas and exchanged stories about families and homes. Despite the language barriers slowing things down, they learned each other's names and began functioning less like separate crews and more like one unified team. Thelnora found herself spending more time talking with Captain Chen, planning the ongoing repairs, and discussing everything from technical specifications to cultural differences, and she discovered that Chen was not just competent, but genuinely wise in ways Kelvorian commanders often were not to. Her people surprised me, Captain Thelnora admitted. During one of their conversations, I was taught humans were reckless and dangerous. Laughed at that. Maybe we are, she said, but sometimes reckless courage is exactly what a situation needs. Your people are precise and careful, which is valuable. But my people know how to improvise and take risks. Different strengths for different probable. Thelnora considered that and realized Chen was right, because the galaxy needed all kinds of thinking, not just one. Then new information came through from Kelvorian Command, and Thelnora felt her brief moment of peace shatter. Commander, we have received updated information from Fleet Command. The tactical officer reported the Kelvorian rescue fleet has been delayed by 6 more days due to political debates about human involvement. Some factions are demanding the humans leave before official Kelvorian ships arrive. 12 days total now, and Thelnora felt anger rise up hot and fierce, because politicians playing games while people needed help was exactly why she had started questioning the Kelvorian way. What else does the message say? Thelnora asked. They are ordering you to limit human access to Kelvorian systems and prepare a full report on all protocol violations. Thela looked at the reports on her display showing stable life support across the fleet, showing recovering systems and surviving families. All because humans had ignored the politics and just helped acknowledge the message. Thelnora said, but tell Command we will continue operations as currently configured. Commander, that is insubordination. The communications officer said. Quitla. Thelnora smiled grimly. Then I am in good company, because Ravik will need a co-defendant at his court-martial on the view screen. Captain Chen was watching with an unreadable expression. You do not have to do this, Commander. Chen said Kelvorians should not risk their careers for humans. Solara shook her head. Humans should not have risked their lives for Kelvorians, but you did anyway, so I think we are beyond worrying about careers now. Before Chen could respond, proximity alarms suddenly blared across every ship in the fleet, and the tactical officer shouted a warning that made Thelnora's blood freeze. Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace, unknown configuration. They are powering weapons. An alien fleet was stranded, then humanity arrived to help. Part 4. Bonds forged in crisis. The pirate ships appeared on sensors like predators smelling blood in the water, 8 vessels of mixed design carrying weapons that looked salvaged and modified, but no less dangerous for their crude appearance, and they were moving toward their disabled Kelvorian fleet with clear hostile intent. Nora counted the numbers in her head: 8 armed pirate ships against 12 disabled Kelvorian vessels and 1 small human exploration ship. The mathematics of combat were even worse than the mathematics of survival had been hailed them. Thelnora ordered, though she suspected it, but accomplished nothing, because pirates attack disabled fleets were not usually interested. In conversation, the main view screen flickered and showed a creature that Thelnora did not recognize, some species with multiple arms and eyes that gleamed with cruel. The pirate leader said, and his voice came through the translators with a hissing quality, "You are damaged and helpless. Surrender your cargo and technology, and we might let some of you live." Thelnara stood straighter, drawing herself to full height. "This is Commander Thelnara of the Kelvorian Imperial Fleet. You are threatening military vessels, which is an Activorth." A pirate laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "The Kelvorian Empire is weeks away from here, and we will be gone long before they arrive, so surrender or die. The choice is simple." Transmission cut off, and immediately the pirate ships began moving into attack formation, spreading out to target multiple Kelvorian vessels simultaneously, and Thelnora realized they had done this before they knew how to attack disabled fleets. Efficiently, Captain Chen, Thelnora called out, "You should leave. Now your ship is small and fast. You can escape before they target you on the view screen." Chen crossed her arms and looked almost offended. "Did you really just suggest I run away and leave you here? You have no obligation to fight for us," Thelnora said. Though even as she spoke, she knew Chen would refuse, because humans apparently did not think about obligations the same way Kelvorians did. Chen smiled, but there was steel in it. "We did not come all this way and work all these hours just to watch pirates finish the job, so here is what we are going to do, Commander. You and I are going to coordinate a defense." Thelnara wanted to argue, but her tactical officer interrupted with more bad news, "Commander. Our weapons systems are still offline across most of the fleet. Only 3 ships have partial defensive capability." "What about the Wayfarer?" Thelnora asked, looking at Chun. "We have weapons," Chun said, "but not enough to fight 8 ships alone. However, I am guessing your ships have some tricks we can use." Even Demagathalera thought about her vessels and realized Chen was right. Kelvorian ships carried advanced sensor arrays and electronic warfare systems that still functioned even if the main weapons were offline. They also had point defense systems and maneuvering thrusters that could be used. Creative Lowervik, Thelnora called out, and a moment later her second officer appeared on screen from the medical facility, looking pale but alert. "You should be resting." "Right time for resting, Commander," Ravik said, and managed a weak smile. "What do you need?" "I need your creative thinking," Thelnora said, and felt strange asking for creativity, because Kelvorians usually valued precision over innovation. But if humans had taught her anything, it was that rules could be bent. "Can we use our damaged systems as well?" Bonsrovik was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his eyes brightened. "Maybe yes. If we overload the sensor arrays, we could create electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disrupt their targeting. Systems and the cargo containers on Vessel 9 are full of mining equipment, including industrial cutting lasers." Thelnora felt hope sparked, because that might actually work, and beside her Captain Chen was nodding. "My people can help rig those systems." Chen said, "Jackson is still recovering, but I have other engineers who love making things explode." The next 20 minutes became a frantic race as human and Kelvorian crews worked together to turn damaged ships into improvised weapons platforms. They positioned cargo containers full of mining equipment to use as both shields and weapon mounts. They reconfigured sensor arrays to emit disruptive pulses, and they even started venting atmosphere from damaged sections to create visual cover. Like artificial fog and Thelnara coordinated from her bridge while Captain Chen commanded the Wayfarer, and together they built a defense plan that violated every regulation about proper combat doctrine, because proper combat doctrine assumed you had working ships and time to prepare, and they had. Neither the pirates moved closer, clearly confident in their superior numbers and firepower, and Thelnara watched them approach while her hearts hammered because this had to work. Wait for it. Thelnara whispered, watching the range indicators tick down. Let them get close enough that they cannot avoid our surprises. Pirate ships entered optimal attack range, and Thelnara saw their weapons charging, preparing to fire on the helpless Kelvorian vessels, and she waited one more second, then gave the order, now hit them with everything. Vessel for fired its overloaded sensor array, and a massive electromagnetic pulse washed over 3 pirate ships, scrambling their systems and causing their weapons to misfire. Vessel 9 activated the industrial cutting lasers mounted on cargo containers and sliced into a pirate ship that had moved too close. The Wayfarer darted forward faster than should be possible and launched a spread of missiles that hammered into another pirate vessel. The pirates scattered in confusion because disabled prey was not supposed to fight back and certainly was not supposed to coordinate this effectively. Keep the pressure on. Thelnara ordered and watched as her damaged fleet used every trick and improvisation her crews could imagine. A human engineer named Lisa commandeered the cargo handling systems on Vessel 6 and started launching shipping containers at the pirates, using them as massive kinetic projectiles that were slow but devastating. When they connected, a Kelvorian tactical officer figured out how to turn the point defense lasers into offensive weapons by linking 12 of them together for concentrated fire. The improvised defense was messy and chaotic and violated every principle of proper military tactics, but it was working. The pirates were taking damage, and their confident attack was falling apart into disorganized chaos. We got one, Chen shouted, as a pirate ship broke apart under concentrated fire and debris scattered across space. 2 more are retreating. Thelnar's tactical officer reported, but 5 are still attacking, and they are adapting to our tactics. Thelnara saw it happening. The pirates were regrouping, staying at longer range where the improvised weapons were less effective, and they were focusing fire on Vessel 9, which had been their most effective combat platform. Vessel 9 is taking heavy damage, the tactical officer said. Their shields are failing. Get people off that ship now, Thelnara ordered, but even as she spoke, she knew evacuation would take too long. Wait. I have an idea, Jackson said, and his voice came through sounding weak, but determined, and Thelnara saw on the monitors that he had left. Medical End was heading toward a transport pod. Engineer, you were not cleared for duty. Thelnara protested. Yeah, well, I am not cleared for dying either, Jackson replied, and he was already climbing into the pod, so let us try something crazy before anyone could stop him. Jackson's pod launched from Vessel 9, and Thelnara watched in disbelief as he piloted straight toward the largest pirate ship, moving fast and erratic. What is he doing? Chen asked, and even she sounded worried. Something stupid, probably, one of Jackson's team members said with a mix of pride and concern. Jackson's pod reached the pirate ship, and instead of firing weapons, he activated a docking clamp attaching a small transport to the pirate's hull. Then the monitors showed him working on the pirate's external systems, using his tools to cause damage directly. He is manually sabotaging their ship, Ravik said with amazement in his voice. That is either brilliant or insane. Probably both, Thelnara muttered, and watched as Jackson cut through power conduits, causing one of the pirate vessel's weapon arrays to explode from a feedback surge. Pirate ship spun, trying to shake off the pod, but Jackson held on like a parasite and kept working, causing system failures across the pirate vessel. And Thelnara realized this human engineer was single-handedly taking down a ship 10 times larger than his transport. The other pirates saw what was happening and turned their attention toward Jackson, trying to kill him before he could cause more damage, but that meant they stopped focusing on Vessel 9. All ships concentrate fire on the pirates targeting Jackson, Thelnara ordered, and the entire fleet responded, hammering the pirate vessels with every weapon they could bring to bear the battle. Became brutal, close-range chaos with ships on both sides taking damage, but the Kelvorians and humans were fighting with desperate prestige. While the pirates were starting to realize this raid had gone very wrong, another pirate ship broke apart. Then another, and suddenly there were only 3 left, and they were damaged and surrounded the remaining pirates made. A run for it, jumping to hyperspace in a disorganized retreat, and leaving behind debris and 2 of their disabled vessels we did. Ravik's voice came through, shaky with exhaustion and disbelief. We actually did, Thelnera. Lumped in her command chair, feeling drained. Someone get Jackson back here, she ordered, and make sure he goes straight to medical this time. Jackson's pod detached from the destroyed pirate ship and limped back to the fleet. And when he finally emerged, he was covered in burns and cuts from the radiation exposure and combat. Damage combined, but he was grinning. That was not in the manual, the human engineer said, before collapsing, and medical teams rushed to catch him. The aftermath of the battle left everyone exhausted but alive, and Thelnora spent the next hours coordinating damage control and medical treatment for the wounded. She made sure Jackson and Ravik were both in the best medical facility, receiving constant care, because those 2 had saved everyone more than once. Captain Chen transported over to Thelner's flagship, and the 2 commanders met in a quiet observation room away from the chaos. Your engineer is either the bravest person I have ever met or the craziest, Thelnora said. Definitely both, Chen replied, and we are going to have words about leaving medical when he recovers, but I am also going to recommend him for about 15 different commendations. She smiled slightly. Your people fought well, Captain. They turned our damaged fleet into something that could defend itself. Chen shrugged. We just helped your people did most of the actual fighting. We did it together, Thelnara said, and realized that was the truth. Kelvorian precision combined with human improvisation, coordinated effort across species that barely knew each other, working toward a common goal. Chen nodded and looked out the viewport at the damaged but surviving fleet. Yes, we did. So what happens now? Now we wait. Thelnera said the rescue fleet will arrive in about 10 days, assuming they do not delay again. And then Chen asked carefully, and then Thelnera said slowly, I face court-martial for violating regulations, and you'll probably get a lot of questions from Kelvorian officials who do not appreciate humans interfering in imperial business. June smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Sounds about right. Politics always follows after the actual work is done. They stood together in silence, watching the stars and the damaged ships, and Thelnora felt something she had never expected to feel for a human species: genuine friendship and deep respect, because when everything fell apart, humans had shown up and helped without asking for anything in return. Whatever happens next, Thelnara said quietly. Thank you for everything. Chen glanced at her, and the smile became more genuine. We just did what anyone should. Do Commander help when help is needed? And the monitors. Thelnara could see mixed crews of Kelvorians and humans working together, repairing, damage sharing, food, telling stories, and slowly building connections that might last long after this crisis ended. And she thought maybe the galaxy was changing. Maybe humans were not the reckless junior partners everyone assumed, but something more important: potential friends who would stand beside you when things got dark. The future was uncertain and probably full of political complications, but right now in this moment, Thelnora felt hope. An alien fleet was stranded. Then humanity arrived to help. Part 5. The rescue becomes a stand. 10 days after the pirate attack, the Kelvorian rescue fleet finally arrived, and Thelnora watched on her sensors as 15 pristine military vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation with weapons charged and shields at maximum. Because apparently they expected trouble. Commander Thelnera, this is Fleet Admiral Korath. You will prepare to transfer command immediately and submit to formal inquiry. Thelnara had known this was coming, but hearing the cold official tone still felt like a blow. Understood, Admiral, she replied, keeping her voice neutral, but we will need time to coordinate the transfer. Our ships have been operating under non-standard conditions. That is precisely the problem, Korath said, and his face appeared on the view screen, looking stern and disapproving. I have reports of unauthorized cooperation with human forces, violation of technology sharing protocols, and general disregard for proper procedures. We were dying, Admiral, Thelnora said, and felt her temper flare. The human vessel arrived when no one else would help. They saved 10,000 lives. They interfered in Kelvorian military operations. Korath replied, and contaminated our systems with their primitive technology. I am here to restore proper order beside Thelnora. Her crew exchanged glances, and she could see anger in their expressions because the Admiral was talking about saving lives, like it was an inconvenience to his paperwork. Permission to speak freely, Commander Ravik said from his station, and Thelnora nodded because she had a feeling she knew what was coming. Admiral Korath, with all due respect, you were not here, Ravik said, and his voice carried an edge. Thelnora had never heard before. You did not watch the air run out or the temperatures drop. You did not see children struggling to breathe. While our supposed allies made excuses, the humans came when we needed help, and they asked for nothing in return. They risked their lives for strangers, so perhaps before you criticize, we should remember. We are alive to have this conversation because of them. Korath looked taken aback because junior officers did not speak to admirals this way, but before he could respond, other voices joined in. The Admiral should review the sensor logs from the pirate attack. Thelnor's tactical officer said we would all be dead or captured without the human assistance. Engineer Jackson personally saved Vessel 9, another crew member added, and nearly died doing it. The humans worked around the clock to repair our system. Someone else called out they shared their food and supplies when they barely had enough for them. Sylvestelner watched as her entire crew spoke up, defending the humans, and she felt pride swell in her chest because these were Kelvorians who had been taught humans were junior partners. But they had seen the truth and were not afraid to say it. Enough, Korath said sharply. This is not a debate. I have my orders, and you all will comply. Before Thelnora could respond, Captain Chen appeared on a secondary screen, and Thelnora saw that Chen was broadcasting to the entire area, including all the newly arrived Kelvorian ships. Admiral Korath, Chen said calmly, my name is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Wayfarer, and I just want to be clear about something. We came here to help because people needed help, not because we wanted anything from the Kelvorian Empire. We do not need recognition or payment or political considerations. We just saw people dying and decided that was unacceptable. Wrath turned toward Chen's transmission. Your involvement was unauthorized, Captain, and has created significant diplomatic complications. Chen smiled, but it was not friendly. The only complication I see, Admiral, is that we saved your people, and now you seem angry about it, which tells me you care more about protocols than lives. That is out of line, Korath snapped. Maybe, Chen replied, but here is what I know. I know. Engineer Jackson crawled into a radioactive chamber to save Officer Ravik. I know my entire crew worked themselves to exhaustion, repairing ships they had never seen before. I know we fought off pirates together using improvised weapons because we did not have anything else, and I know that every person on those 12 ships is alive right now because humans and Kelvorians work together. So if that creates diplomatic complications, then maybe your diplomacy needs better priority. Silence fell across the communications channels, and Thelnora saw crew members on her bridge nodding in agreement, and even some of the officers on the newly arrived Kelvorian ships looked uncomfortable as if they were questioning their orders. Admiral, I should mention something else, Ravik said into the quiet. We have been monitoring local communications, and word about what happened here has spread. Other species are talking about how humans dropped everything to help strangers, apparently. That kind of action makes an impression. Korath looked troubled. What kind of impression? The kind where other species are asking why they did not help, Ravik replied, and why humans seem to value life more than following regulations. The kind where the Kelvorian Empire might look bad by comparison. Thela understood what Ravik was doing. He was giving the Admiral a reason to change course. That had nothing to do with morality and everything to do with political appearances, because sometimes you had to speak in language. Bureaucrats understood. Admiral, with respect, Thelnora said carefully, Commander Chen is right about the core facts. Humans saved us when others would not. That story is already spreading, and how we respond now will define how the galaxy sees both our species. Korath was quiet for a long moment, and Thelnora could almost see him calculating the political costs and benefits. Finally, he sighed. Very well. The formal inquiry will proceed, but I will recommend leniency given the extreme circumstances." And he looked at Chen. "Captain. Chen, on behalf of the Kelvorian Empire, I acknowledge the debt we owe to you." And your crew Chen nodded once. "That is all we needed to hear, Admiral. Over." The next several hours, the rescue fleet began coordinating with Thelnor's damaged vessels, preparing for towing operations and repairs. The transition was professional, but Thelnora noticed something interesting. Many of the officers from the rescue fleet kept finding excuses to talk with the humans, asking questions about what happened and how they managed to survive. Admiral Korath even transported over to meet with Thelnora and Chen in person, and when he saw the damage to the ships and the exhaustion on the crews faces, his stern expression softened slightly. "I read the reports," he said quietly, "but seeing it is different. You truly kept all these people alive with improvised equipment and cooperation." "We did what we had to do," Thelnora replied, "and the humans made it possible." Irith turned to Chen. "You know this will create precedent, Captain. Other species will expect humans to help them in emergencies, and that could be dangerous for your people." Chen shrugged. "Maybe, but sitting back when we could help seems more dangerous to who we want to be as a species." Besides, she added with a slight smile, "if this creates diplomatic complications, you could always establish formal cooperation protocols with Earth." Is that what you want?" Korath asked. "Political arrangements?" Shook her head. "What I want is for next time this happens, there is no question about whether people help each other. I want species to stop calculating political costs before deciding if lives matter. But until that happens, yes, formal cooperation protocols would help." Korath considered this, then nodded. "I will bring it to the Empire Council, and I will recommend they take it seriously." 3 days later, the fleet was ready to depart with the Kelvorian rescue vessels towing the damaged ships back to proper repair facilities, and Thelnora found herself standing in the docking bay watching the human crew prepare to leave. Jackson approached on crutches because his radiation injuries still had not fully healed, and behind him Ravik walked slowly, still recovering as well. The two of them had become unlikely friends, bonded by shared trauma and mutual respect. "You take care of yourself, human," Jackson said to Ravik, "and try not to break any more protocols. Only if you promise to follow medical advice," Ravik replied, "and stop leaving treatment early." Both of them smiled because they knew neither would keep those promises. Lisa, the human engineer who had used cargo containers as weapons, hugged a Kelvorian tactical officer who had helped her jury-rig the systems and promised to stay in touch. Other crew members exchanged contact information and small gifts, little tokens to remember each other. Captain Chen walked up to Thelnora, and for a moment neither of them spoke because words seemed inadequate for what they had been through together. "You changed my perspective, Captain," Thelnora finally said. "I was taught to see regulations as absolute and other species as fixed categories, but you showed me that flexibility and cooperation matter more than rules." Chen smiled. "You were pretty flexible yourself, Commander. Not every officer would have accepted help from humans or defended us to an Admiral." Thela felt herself smile back. "If you ever need help, Captain, if Earth ever faces something difficult, send word to me personally. I owe you a debt." Chun extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship, and Thelnora gripped it firmly, understanding that this was more than protocol. This was a genuine connection between two people who had faced death together. "Your empire has my contact information," Chen said, "and if you ever want to visit Earth, you would be welcome. We have some pretty good food, and the mountains are nice. I would like that." Thelnora said, and meant it. Maybe when the political situation calms down. The wayfarer departed. An hour later, and Thelnora watched from the observation deck as the small human ship accelerated away, heading back toward Earth space, carrying a crew that had done something remarkable without ever asking for praise or recognition. Admiral Korath approached and stood beside her, watching the wayfarer disappear into the distance. "You were right, Commander," we said quietly. "The formal inquiry will recommend no charges against you or your crew. What you did here, even if irregular, was necessary." "An effective thank you, Admiral," Thelnora replied, but her attention was still on the space where the human ship had. Gankrith continued, "I spoke with Earth diplomats, and we are establishing an exchange program Kelvorian officers will train with. Human crews and vice versa, your experience convinced the Council that we have much to learn from each other. Thonara turned to look at him, surprised at his significant progress, and Miral Korath nodded. It is also smart politics because word of this rescue has spread across the galaxy, and species are taking notice. Humans are being seen as reliable partners who value life over profit, and the Kelvorian Empire wants to be associated with that, not opposed to it. Political calculations again, Thelnora thought, but at least this time they were leading to positive outcomes. She looked around at her crew, who were already working with the rescue fleet personnel, and she saw how the experience had changed them. They moved with more confidence, asked more questions, challenged assumptions, and most importantly, they saw cooperation as strength rather than weakness. Ravik approached with datapads full of reports. Commander, the preliminary damage assessments are complete. We should reach the repair yards in about 2 weeks. Good work, Ravik, Thelnora said, then added, and thank you for speaking up during the inquiry. Your testimony helped. Ravik shrugged. I just told the truth, Commander. Humans saved us, and we should not be ashamed to admit it, actually. We should celebrate it weeks later, after the ships had been repaired and the crews had returned to regular duty. Thelnora received a message from Captain Chen. It was a simple video showing the Wayfarer crew back on Earth, gathered around a table full of food and raising glasses in a toast. 2 new friends, Chen said in the video, and to helping each other, no matter what the regulations say. Thelnora smiled and recorded her own response, showing her crew in their mess hall, raising their own drinks too. Humans who show up when needed, she said, and to breaking the right rules at the right times. She sent the message, and then called her senior officers together. I have been thinking, Thelnora said, and everyone leaned in, curious about what happens when species learn to truly cooperate instead of just coexist. Ravik smiled. Where do we start? Thelnora pulled up star charts showing the vast galaxy full of different species and cultures and challenges. Here, she said, we just survived something impossible by working together, so now we figure out how to make that the normal approach instead of the exception. We teach others what we learned, we break down barriers, we help when help is needed, regardless of politics. Her officers nodded, and Thelnora saw determination in their faces, because they had all been changed by this experience, had all learned that the galaxy was bigger and more connected than they had believed. Admiral Korath had been right. This rescue created precedent, and that precedent would ripple across civilizations for generations. Humans had shown that courage and compassion mattered more than regulations, and Kelvorians had learned to value flexibility over rigid tradition. The damaged fleet had become something more than just survivors. They had become proof that different species could work together, that cooperation was possible, that the galaxy did not have to be divided into hierarchies and categories, and lesser or greater civilization. Ella looked at her crew and her ships and thought about the small human vessel that had arrived when no one else would, and she made a private promise that she would never forget what that meant. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of potential for connection and friendship and cooperation across every imaginable difference. And if one human crew could make that kind of impact, then maybe others could, too. Maybe the future would be built not by the most advanced species or the most powerful empires, but by those who understood that helping others was never a violation of protocol. It was the highest principle of all. Commander Thelnora smiled and turned back to her work, preparing reports, coordinating with other fleets, and quietly starting to build something new, because an alien fleet had been stranded, and humanity had arrived to help, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be quite the same again.